Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you are watching the NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Israeli airstrikes have killed a senior Hamas official in the Gaza Strip. Political leader Salah al-Bardawil and his wife were killed in the southern city of Khan-Yunis. This comes as the Israeli army orders Gazans to evacuate part of the southern city of Rafah. An Istanbul court has formally placed the city's opposition leader under arrest on charges of corruption. His detention has sparked some of Turkey's worst unrest in over a decade. In Sudan, at least 45 people have been killed in a paramilitary attack in North Darfur. In the past hour, RSF shelling has killed a further 3 civilians in the Durran region. An Israeli airstrike strikes the coastal city of Tyre in Lebanon, killing at least 1 person. Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salem says his country is at risk of being thrown into a new war as dozens of airstrikes kill at least 5 others. Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff had dismissed Keir Starmer's plan for an international force to support a ceasefire in Ukraine. In an interview with Tucker Carlson, Witkoff says that he does not regard Putin as a bad guy and described him as super smart. After 5 weeks, Pope Francis is set to be discharged from hospital today. He will make his first public appearance after he was admitted on a severe respiratory infection that resulted in double pneumonia. Israeli opposition leader calls for a general strike if Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu refuses to obey a Supreme Court decision freezing the government's dismissal of the security chief. This comes as thousands of Israelis protest the dismissal of Shin Bet leader. Wildfires in South Korea kill 4 people and displace hundreds from their homes. Firefighters are scrambling to control the blaze in the country's south. The Israeli military urged residents of Rafah in southern Gaza to evacuate as forces launched an offensive against militants. Military spokesperson Avichai Adari stated the opposition targets terrorist organization in Rafah's Tal at-Sultan district, advising Palestinians to leave the combat zone. On the other hand, the Palestine Red Crescent Society says it has lost contact with several paramedics after Israeli forces surrounded their ambulances in the southern city of Rafah. Meanwhile, Trump's advisor Mike Waltz calls the president's proposal to forcibly resettle Palestinians from Gaza a practical idea, as he said he believes rebuilding the Strip just to see terrorists attack all over again is the definition of insanity. Israel has launched a new wave of airstrikes across Gaza targeting senior Hamas officials. One strike in Khan-Yunis killed political Hamas leader Salah al-Bardawil and his wife, according to Hamas officials. Hamas has condemned the strike as an assassination. The group claims Bardawil was praying when an Israeli missile hit his tent shelter. Israel has not yet commented on his death. Israel is facing growing political tensions as opposition leader Yair Lapid has called for a general strike if Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu refuses to obey a Supreme Court order. The court order has blocked the Netanyahu government's decision to dismiss the Shin Bet chief Ronan Bar, a move that has spiked 3 days of protests. Thousands have gathered in Tel Aviv, waving Israeli flags and demanding Netanyahu reverse his decision to dismiss the internal security chief. Protesters are accusing Netanyahu of undermining democracy and endangering national security. Some say his government is trying to control the country's security agencies for political gain. Netanyahu has defended his decision, saying only the government can choose who leads Shin Bet. He insists Israel will remain a democracy despite the court's intervention. However, critics argue his actions are pushing the country into a constitutional crisis. Let's listen in to what Netanyahu and Lapid had to say.
תחליט לא לציית לפסיקת בית המשפט, היא תהפוך את עצמה באותו יום, באותו רגע, לממשלה עבריינית. אם זה יקרה, באותו רגע המדינה כולה צריכה לעצור. יש מערכת אחת שלא יכולה לעצור, זו מערכת הביטחון. אנחנו נגד כל סרבנות, אבל חוץ מזה, הכל. המשק צריך לשבות, הכנסת צריכה לשבות, בתי המשפט צריכים לשבות, הרשויות המקומיות צריכות לשבות, לא רק האוניברסיטאות, בתי הספר צריכים לשבות.
רונן בר לא יישאר ראש השב"כ, לא תהיה מלחמת אחים, וישראל תישאר מדינה דמוקרטית.
In recent updates, an Israeli drone has struck southern Lebanon. This comes after Israeli airstrikes and artillery fire pounded southern Lebanon a few hours back, killing at least 8 people. This comes after Israel had intercepted rockets from across the border. The attacks mark a sharp escalation in hostilities, threatening a fragile truce that ended last year's deadly war between Israel and Hezbollah. Lebanon's health ministry confirmed fatalities in Tyre, a coastal city hit in a second wave of Israeli strikes. Another attack in Kwale wounded 4. Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam warned that Israel's military operations risk plunging Lebanon into a new war. Israel's military said it was targeting Hezbollah positions in response to ongoing rocket fire. Strikes were also reported in Zikwim, southeast of Tyre. Regional leaders are calling for urgent diplomatic intervention to prevent further escalation. Staying in the Middle East now, where Iran's Revolutionary Guards have stationed new missile systems on Greater Tunb, Lesser Tunb and Abu Musa near the Strait of Hormuz, capable of targeting enemy bases, vessels and assets within 600 kilometers. The deployment follows recent military drills and coincides with Iran's pending response to a letter from US President Donald Trump, urging nuclear talks while warning of military action. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei dismissed US threats, vowing retaliation against any hostility. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi viewed Trump's letter as more of a danger but acknowledged potential opportunities. The US maintains a goal of building trust with Tehran. Iran has controlled the disputed islands since 1971, despite long-standing UAE claims. Here's what Commander Ali Reza Tangsiri said.
شناورهای دشمن و دارایی‌های دشمن در منطقه را ما قادر هستیم که اینها را مورد
Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff dismissed UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's plan for an international force to support a Ukraine ceasefire as simplified and likened to a Churchillian posture. In an interview with Tucker Carlson, Witkoff praised Vladimir Putin as super smart and gracious, repeating Russian claims that Ukraine is a false country and suggesting occupied Ukrainian regions should be recognized as Russian. Witkoff inaccurately described the conflict, misidentified Ukrainian regions, and echoed Kremlin narratives. He criticized Starmer's coalition idea and claimed NATO prevented Russian expansion into Europe. Witkoff projected a near-term Black Sea ceasefire and shared Trump's vision for US-Russia cooperation on energy, sea routes, and AI, following normalized relations. Meanwhile, in latest attacks, Russian drone strikes on the Ukrainian capital overnight killed at least 3 people and wounded 10, according to the available information. 3 people died, including a 5-year-old. Another 10 were wounded. The Kiev City Military Administration said on Telegram. This followed Russia's overnight drone strike on Kiev that left at least 7 injured and set high-rise buildings ablaze, Ukrainian officials reported. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko confirmed 1 hospitalization as emergency crews tackled fires across multiple districts. Falling drone debris ignited the blazes in the Podil and Dnipropetrovsk areas. Kiev's military chief Timur Kladenko stated The full scale of the assault remains uncertain, though blasts likely from air defense responses were heard in the surrounding region. 2 more people were injured and several homes suffered damage, according to the regional governor, Mykola Krashnik. Moscow has yet to respond. Meanwhile, Kiev and eastern Ukraine endured over 5 hours of air raid alerts overnight. We are joined by Professor Rohan Gunaratne, Middle East Affairs expert located in Singapore, to discuss this further. Rohan, I wanted to start with these comments from US envoy Steve Witkoff dismissing possible European plans. Now that a senior Trump envoy is publicly dismissing the UK opposition leader's Ukraine policy, does this reflect a fundamental shift how a future Trump administration might view the war?
Trump is very close to Putin. They have built a very personal and a professional relationship. Trump is determined to resolve the conflict in Ukraine, and Putin has cooperated with him. But of course, the Russians are continuing their operations during this phase just before they enter into a ceasefire. So Russians are doing their best to gain some strength before the formal discussion starts. And that's why we have seen the overnight strikes that Russia has conducted in Kiev. And this kind of intermittent attacks will continue until a ceasefire is established and the governments go into talks.
Professor Gunaratne, it seems like this conflict has led to Trump and Putin becoming ever more close, and that seems to be going through his top staffing as well. You see Witkoff defending Putin, calling him very smart. What does this attitude say about the current state of the United States?
It is also that Trump believes that unless there is that personal rapport and friendship, he cannot move forward and strike a deal. He's determined to do this. Even if you look at how Trump dealt with the North Korean leader, right? He was very friendly with him. So his style of doing these international negotiations is very similar to what he did as a businessman, to make friends and then to negotiate and to discuss.
Professor Gunaratne, you just brought up the example of Kim Jong-un. Obviously, we saw that in Donald Trump's previous term. Russia, Vladimir Putin claims to have won elections in Russia, so he has consolidated power. These claims are widely disputed, that these elections were legitimate. If they weren't, is there a kind of thing that Donald Trump may kind of favor the dictator in that regard, in negotiating with the dictator?
Putin is a very popular leader in Russia. Whatever people may say, he has sustained his popularity in Russia. And Trump knows that. That's why Trump says that Putin is a very smart man. And of course, he is very competent in warfare, not only in what he has done in Ukraine, but more internationally in information and influence operations. The Putin's strategic communications capabilities are huge. He's able to influence public opinion. He's able to influence the outcome of who will be leaders. The Russians have mastery of the information domain, where they are able to influence public thinking, even European thinking, in a very significant way.
But my question is, why has this trust been gained? We have obviously seen the Americans previously donate millions and millions of pounds towards the Ukrainian war effort. Why has there been this sudden trust gained in Vladimir Putin from Donald Trump, obviously, but it seems to be his staff as well, and some Republicans as a whole?
It is a personal relationship between Trump and Putin. So if you look at the National Security Agency's assessment, the FBI assessments before, you can see that there are various assessments that were made that the Russians even influenced the outcome of Trump's election. So in many ways, what we have seen is that Trump and Putin has had a friendship, a relationship over a long period of time. It's not only just this term. And Trump is determined to resolve this conflict.
Professor Rohan Gunaratne, thank you very much for joining us. You are staying with us. We now move to some more news. An Istanbul court has officially ordered the arrest of the city's opposition mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu. This comes after his detention 4 days ago, which sparked Turkey's most severe unrest in more than a decade, as reported by one of his lawyers to the media. Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu appeared in court for questioning. Prosecutors grilled him over allegations of corruption and links to terrorism. He has denied those charges. His detention earlier this week sparked nationwide protests. Prosecutors are seeking to imprison his imprisonment along with 4 aides ahead of his trial. Meanwhile, thousands gathered outside Istanbul's municipal building in Saraçhane, defying a ban on street demonstrations. The restriction initially imposed in the city has now been extended until March the 26th. Demonstrations have spread to 55 of Turkey's 81 provinces. The unrest marks the country's largest street protests in more than 10 years. Yesterday, riot police moved in on protesters at City Hall. Officers fired tear gas, forcing many to take shelter inside the buildings. According to state media reports, multiple arrests were made, but official figures remain clear. CHP leader Özgür Özel addressed the crowd, claiming over 500,000 protesters had gathered. Turkey's journalists union reports that many were beaten, shot with rubber bullets, and had their equipment destroyed. Reporters Without Borders condemned the violence, calling it heavy-handed and completely arbitrary. The group is demanding accountability and punishment for those responsible.
Sokaklara çıkarak yanına sol örgütleri, marjinalleri, vandalları alarak milli iradeye parmak sallama dönemleri artık geride kalmıştır. Sokak terörü üzerinden siyasete ve adalete istikamet çizildiği günler eski Türkiye ile birlikte tamamen mazide.
We are joined to discuss this further with Professor Rohan Gunaratne once again. Professor, what does this case say about the state of democracy and rule of law in Turkey under Erdogan? Obviously, we've seen restrictions imposed by the government. We saw a ban on social media very briefly. What does it say about the state of democracy, freedom of speech in the state of Turkey right now?
Erdogan is a dictator. What he has done to the Istanbul mayor clearly demonstrates that the people of Turkey are angry. Erdogan is a very powerful man. Even today he is very powerful, but he is fast losing his grip over Turkey. You yourself mentioned that of 81 districts, in 55 districts there are surging protests. These protests will grow over time and Erdogan will lose power. And of course, İmamoğlu will become the next leader of Turkey.
Professor Gunaratne, are we seeing a broader pattern of authoritarian consolidation in the region, from Turkey to other parts of the Middle East?
Certainly the leaders like Erdogan, they have to demonstrate power and strength. So this is not only Turkey, it is a feature throughout the Middle East. And with people, protesters, with demonstrations, those leaders will have to govern, will have to rule with a tight fist. And that is what Erdogan is doing. He's deployed the military, he's deployed the police, he's deployed the security and intelligence services to arrest those who are opposing him, not only in the physical space, but also in the virtual space. So he's exercising state authority for him to remain sustained in power. But there comes a tipping point where the protesters and the demonstrators and the opposition will overwhelm him. And at that point, he will have to flee Turkey.
Professor Gunaratne, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about who is Imamoglu and why did Erdogan see him, why would he be seen as a threat from the current administration?
Imamoglu is the most popular leader in the political opposition in Turkey. And he's also a fearless man. And he's a champion for democracy and freedom. And if you look at the protesters, they are mostly young. And they are deeply influenced by the West, especially by Europe. And they do not want Erdogan's style of rule. Erdogan is a political Islamist. They want Turkey to be more like a European country than a Middle Eastern state. So in many ways, what we have seen is a clash of ideologies. And this itself is going to change Turkey. And the new Turkey will identify more with Europe than with the Middle East.
Professor Rohan Gunaratne, thank you very much for joining us. We now move on once again. The British government has launched an investigation into the country's energy resilience. This comes after a fire at an electrical substation shut down Heathrow Airport for nearly a day. While the airport is now fully operational, thousands of passengers remain stranded, and the airlines warn that disruptions could last for days. Labour politician Toby Harris called the incident a huge embarrassment, questioning how one fire could cripple Europe's busiest air hub. British Airways, Heathrow's main carrier, operated around 90% of its scheduled flights on Saturday and expects a near full service by Sunday. Officials are now probing the UK's ability to protect critical infrastructure as calls grow for stronger safeguards. We stay now in the UK. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said US President Donald Trump has a point about European countries needing to talk more on responsibility for their collective self-defence. In an interview with the New York Times, Starmer expressed the need to think about defence and security more urgently. He is working to create a multinational military force. This force, called a Coalition of the Willing, aims to protect Ukraine's skies, ports and borders after any peace settlement. Starmer described his relationship with Trump as good on a personal level. However, he also noted that Trump's actions, such as imposing a 25% tariff on British steel and criticising Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, have caused quite a degree of disorientation. Britain is making a major push to tackle its construction skills shortage. The government has pledged £600 million, which is around $775 million, to train and upskill workers. This comes as the country faces a critical gap in skilled labour, hindering its plan to build 1.5 million new homes by 2029. House building and infrastructure improvements are central to Britain's growth strategy. Construction makes up 6% of the nation's economy, but struggles to meet demand. The government plans to invest £165 million in new courses and £100 million to upskill existing workers. In addition, the Construction Industry Training Board will fund 40,000 placements a year. The goal is to train 60,000 workers, including bricklayers, electricians and carpenters by 2029. The move comes as Britain grapples with a shortage exacerbated by Brexit and COVID, and with many skilled workers nearing retirement. The government's investment aims to secure the future of the construction industry. The United States has lifted a $10 million reward for information leading to the arrest of Taliban leader Sirajuddin Haqqani, according to the Afghan Ministry of Interior Affairs. Despite the announcement, the FBI still lists the reward, saying Haqqani is believed to have coordinated cross-border attacks against US and coalition forces in Afghanistan. This comes after the Taliban freed a US citizen, George Glesman, who had been held captive for 2 years. Haqqani is the head of the Haqqani Network, a US-designed terror group. The group is infamous for suicide bombings and assassinations of top Afghanistan officials. Haqqani remains a key figure on the US radar, particularly after a drone strike killed al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri in a house linked to Haqqani back in 2022. Thousands of people have marched in Paris and other cities across France to protest against racism and the rise of the far right. The protests come amid a shift to the right in French politics. The current government has promised to tighten immigration rules and border controls. In Paris, clashes broke out between police and some demonstrators. Authorities say 2 people were arrested and 3 were injured, including a riot police officer. Many protesters carried signs warning about the rise of the far-right policies in France and beyond. Some also criticized the United States, with placards linking Donald Trump to the rise of the ideology in Europe. The protests took place 1 day after the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Human rights groups say France is seeing a dangerous rise in racist and anti-Semitic acts. Let's take a look at what some of the demonstrators had to say.
Parce que déjà, en tant que Français, je pense que c'est important de pouvoir défendre nos valeurs. D'autant plus avec la montée de l'extrême droite, c'est important pour nous, notre génération, d'être conscient de ce qui se passe en ce moment. Et voilà, donc on est là pour défendre nos droits et nos libertés.
On est en train de nous entraîner là, vers la division, vers la violence, vers l'injustice raciste. Et avec les idées d'extrême droite, je trouve très important qu'on soit nombreux pour dire c'est pas ça la France. La France, c'est un projet politique. C'est un projet où tout le monde est français dans la mesure où on a le même projet politique, qui est celui de la Révolution française, de la République, de la démocratie, etc. Donc je trouve que c'est très important que le plus de gens possible soient là, parce que sinon c'est la haine, c'est la division, c'est le malheur. Faut pas...
Staying in Europe now, Pope Francis is set to be discharged from the hospital today after battling pneumonia for over 5 weeks. However, doctors say he will need at least 2 more months of rest at the Vatican. The 88-year-old pontiff was admitted to Rome's Gemelli Hospital on February the 14th with a severe respiratory infection. It became the most serious health crisis of his 12-year papacy. Dr. Sergio Alfieri, the head of the Pope's medical team, stressed the importance of a full convalescence. He advised against large meetings or any activity that requires significant effort. Francis suffered from double pneumonia and experienced 4 acute respiratory crises while in the hospital. 2 of them were critical, putting his life in danger. Doctors say he is no longer battling pneumonia, but the infection was complex and involved multiple microorganisms. Dr. Luigi Carbone from the Vatican's healthcare service confirmed that a nurse would care for the Pope at the Vatican residence. The Vatican announced that Francis will make his first public appearance in over 5 weeks today. So far, the Pope has only been seen in a single photo released last week, showing him in prayer at a hospital chapel.
The Holy Father will be discharged tomorrow, as we said before, in a stable clinical condition with a prescription to partially continue drug therapy and a convalescence and rest period at least 2 months.
Moving over to Africa now, where M23 rebels vow to withdraw from Walikale, citing peace efforts, but Congo's army remains doubtful. The move follows M23's last-minute pullout from planned talks with Congo's government due to EU sanctions on its leaders. While Congo urges action, officials suspect the rebels are advancing towards Mubi after supply routes were cut. M23's westward push has brought them within 400 kilometers of Kiasingi. The conflict, fueled by Rwanda's 1994 genocide and mineral disputes, has defied ceasefires. Congo accuses Rwanda of aiding M23, but Kigali denies involvement, claiming self-defense. M23 insists on direct talks with Kinshasa. A series of deadly wildfires in South Korea's southern regions have killed at least 4 people, including 3 firefighters, and left hundreds of residents displaced. The fires, which began in Seo-cheong County on Friday, have spread across several regions, burning over 800 hectares of land. Authorities have mobilized hundreds of firefighters along with helicopters to contain the blazes. The fires have prompted the evacuation of at least 260 residents in Sancheong and 620 more in Ulsan and Gyeongsang. South Korea's government declared a state of emergency in the affected provinces, with severe fire warnings issued in 12 locations. The fires have also sparked concerns over the safety of public servants, with 1 confirmed civilian death. As firefighters continue to battle the flames, the nation remains on high alert for further spread of the wildfires. And that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from across the world.